the Chronarch's frustration. Commander Zephrix Vorn of the Chronarch Collective had witnessed the birth of stars, the death of civilizations, and the exact moment 3,000 years from now when he would taste the finest crystallized nebula wine in existence. He had mapped every possible timeline, calculated every probability, and mastered the very fabric of temporal mechanics. Yet somehow, Captain Mira Kazdan was late to their first diplomatic meeting. Zephrix's chronometer, a device that could measure time in units smaller than a photon's heartbeat, ticked past the appointed hour. His temporal advisor, Korath, shifted uncomfortably, his silvery form flickering between 3 different timelines simultaneously. Perhaps they encountered a wormhole anomaly? Korath suggested, his voice harmonizing across multiple temporal frequencies. Impossible, Zephrix replied, consulting the probability matrix hovering before him. I've examined every timeline. In 847 of them, Captain Kazdan arrives exactly 5 minutes late. In 142 she's 7 minutes late. In the remaining scenarios. He paused, mandibles clicking in confusion. The timelines become fuzzy. The diplomatic chamber aboard the temporal nexus was a masterpiece of chronological engineering. The walls displayed every moment of the room's existence simultaneously, its construction, its current state, and its eventual decomposition millennia hence. To the Chronarchs who perceived time as humans perceived space, it was perfectly natural. The doors finally hissed open. Captain Mira Kazdan strode in, her dark hair still damp, wearing a dress uniform that looked hastily assembled. Behind her came her first officer, Dax Reardon, whose tie was slightly askew, and their diplomatic liaison, Elena Voss, clutching a coffee mug that proclaimed, "I'm not arguing, I'm just explaining why I'm right." "Apologies for the delay," Mira said cheerfully, extending her hand. "The shower took longer than expected, then I couldn't find my good boots, and Dax here somehow managed to lock himself in his quarters." Zephrix's temporal sense reeled. He had analyzed 17 billion possible excuses across all timelines. The shower took longer than expected, had a probability of 0.000000002%. It was so unlikely that his computational matrix had classified it as statistically impossible. "You have mastered faster-than-light travel," Zephrix said slowly, his translator struggling with the concept of temporal disbelief. "Your species has colonized 17 star systems. Your scientists have unlocked quantum entanglement for communication. Yet you could not predict the duration of water falling on your body?" Mira shrugged. "It's a whole thing. Sometimes you get in there and think it'll be quick, then you remember you need to condition your hair, and suddenly 20 minutes have vanished." Korath's form split into 6 temporal echoes, each representing his confusion across different timelines. "But, you have chronometers. You have schedules. You have the ability to perceive linear time." "Oh, we perceive it," Dax interjected, grinning. "We just don't really respect it." Elena set down her coffee mug on a table that was simultaneously a seedling, a fully formed piece of furniture, and a pile of dust. "Look, we appreciate you wanting to meet with us. Your temporal technology is incredible. We've read the briefings, you can see the past, visit the future, even exist in multiple timelines simultaneously. Yet you cannot arrive on time," Zephrix said flatly. "Different skill sets," Mira replied. "Speaking of which, shall we discuss why you actually wanted this meeting? Your message said something about a temporal crisis." Zephrix felt something he hadn't experienced in 3,000 subjective years. Surprise. How could she pivot so casually from lateness to galactic catastrophe? "Yes," he said, deciding to move forward despite his confusion. "The Devourers." The mood shifted immediately. Even the humans, with their bizarre relationship with time, understood that name. "The Devourers are approaching the galactic core," Zephrix continued. "Our temporal projections show they will arrive in 6 months, 3 days, 14 hours, and approximately 22 minutes. They will consume all matter and energy in the galaxy within 3 years of their arrival. We have run 847 trillion simulations. In every timeline the galaxy falls." "Every timeline?" Elena asked, her diplomatic instincts sharpening. "Every timeline we can perceive," Korath clarified. "The Devourers exist outside normal temporal mechanics. They consume not just matter but possibility itself. Each world they destroy removes entire branches of potential futures." Mira leaned forward, her casual demeanor evaporating. "And you need our help?" "We need your help," Zephrix admitted, the words tasting strange in his translator. "Because there is one thing we have observed about humans across every timeline we've studied. One consistent, impossible, Absolutely infuriating trait. What's that? Dax asked. Zephrix's eyes, which could see across temporal dimensions, focused solely on the present moment, something he rarely did. You're unpredictable, he said. And unpredictability might be the only weapon we have left. The probability paradox. The briefing room aboard the human vessel Bellerophon was, to Zephrix's temporal senses, absolutely maddening. Unlike chronarch spaces, which existed in perfect temporal harmony, this room was filled with artifacts from different time periods arranged with no logical pattern. Ancient printed books sat beside holographic displays. A coffee maker from the early 2000s bubbled next to a quantum processor. Someone had hung a poster of a cat clinging to a branch with the words, "Hang in there," despite cats being extinct on Earth for 70 years. Welcome to organized chaos, Mira said, noticing Zephrix's disorientation. She gestured to the central holographic display, which showed the Devourer's approach vector. So, explain it to us like we're time-blind idiots. Zephrix's advisor, Quorith, materialized beside the display, his form stabilizing in a single timeline for the human's benefit. The Devourers are a phenomenon we first detected in Timeline Alpha 774, approximately 3,000 years ago in relative time. They appear at the edge of galaxies and move inward, consuming everything. Not just consuming, Zephrix interjected. Erasing. When they destroy a planet, every timeline in which that planet existed collapses. Every potential future that originated from that world simply ceases to be. Dr. Yuki Tanaka, the Bellerophon's chief science officer, leaned forward. Her hair was tied back with what appeared to be a rubber band she'd found in her pocket. They're eating probability itself? Precisely, Quorith said, brightening. Finally, someone who understands. Cool, Yuki interrupted, pulling up her own calculations. But here's what I don't get. You can see multiple timelines, right? You can literally observe different possible futures. Correct. Then why can't you see a timeline where we win? The question hung in the air. Zephrix exchanged a look with Quorith, a conversation that took place across 17 different moments simultaneously. Because, Zephrix said slowly, in every observable timeline we fail. We've tried direct confrontation. Their technology is immune to temporal manipulation. We've tried evacuating galaxies. They move faster than any conventional travel. We've even tried traveling back in time to prevent their origin. Let me guess, Mira interrupted. Time paradox? Bootstrap problem? Grandfather clause? All of the above, Quorith confirmed. The Devourers exist in a state of temporal lock. They cannot be prevented because they've always existed. Attempting to create a timeline where they don't emerge simply doesn't work. The universe corrects itself. Dax Reardon, who had been quietly studying the data, spoke up. But you said there are timelines you can't see. When Mira was late, you mentioned fuzzy timelines. Zephrix's mandibles clicked rapidly, the chronarch equivalent of uncomfortable laughter. Yes, human timelines are problematic for our predictive models. Your species makes decisions that should be impossible based on prior probability chains. Give me an example, Elena said, setting down her third coffee of the meeting. 2 weeks ago, in our observations, Lieutenant Jasper Reed of the Constellation was supposed to input coordinates for a routine supply run, Quorith explained. Every probability matrix predicted he would choose the efficient route. Destination 7, the closest supply depot. Instead, he chose Destination 12 because, and I quote, I wanted to see if they still had those weird purple snacks. Oh, the Nexium purple puffs? Elena lit up. Those things are amazing. That's not the point. Zephrix's voice rose, his temporal form flickering with frustration. That decision led to him encountering a distress signal that wasn't supposed to be discovered for 3 months, which led to a rescue that created an entirely new branch of probability that we couldn't predict, which led to saving 73 lives, Mira finished. I remember that report. Jasper got a commendation. He got a commendation for being random. Zephrix's composure finally cracked. Do you understand how disturbing that is? We chronarchs have spent millennia perfecting the art of temporal navigation. We can predict the movement of galaxies, the evolution of species, the exact moment a star will explode. But we cannot predict whether a human will decide to go left or right because they just feel like it. Yuki tapped her stylus against her chin. So what you're saying is, humans are basically quantum events at a macro scale. That is disturbingly accurate, Quorith admitted. Mira stood, walking to the viewport where the chronarch vessel hung in space like a crystallized moment. You brought us in because you've calculated every possible timeline, and in all of them you lose. Correct. She turned back, a dangerous smile playing at her lips. But you can't calculate our timelines. Also correct. So you're hoping we'll do something completely unpredictable that somehow saves the galaxy? Zephyrix met her gaze. It's either that or watch the Devourers consume everything, including every possible future where we're having this conversation. No pressure then, Dax muttered. Elena raised her coffee mug. To being unpredictable idiots who might accidentally save the universe. I really hope this works, Korath whispered to Zephyrix across 12 different timelines simultaneously. So do I, Zephyrix replied. So do I. The Late War Council. The Galactic Defense Summit was scheduled to begin at 0800 hours, Galactic Standard Time. By 0815, exactly 3 representatives had arrived on time. Commander Zephyrix Vorn, Admiral Cressix of the Methodical Hive Collective, and Counselor Thane from the Precision League. They sat in perfect silence, each consulting their chronometers with increasing agitation. At 0823 the doors burst open. Captain Mira Kazdan rushed in, followed by a procession of human officers, each carrying coffee cups, data pads, and in one case, someone's pet ferret in a carrier. Sorry. Mira called out. The ferret escaped, then the coffee machine broke, and somehow Ensign Parker ended up locked in the observation deck. Again? Admiral Cressix clicked her mandibles in disbelief. The Hive Collective operated on quantum-synchronized consciousness. Every member knew exactly where they needed to be at every moment. The concept of losing track of time was literally incomprehensible to them. How is your species the one that defeated the KRYL Armada? Counselor Thane asked, genuine bewilderment in his crystalline voice. You arrived late to that battle too. Yeah, but we arrived with a really good plan, Dax said, releasing the ferret, named Captain Whiskers, who immediately scurried to Admiral Cressix and began investigating her lower appendages. Zephyrix cleared his throat, his temporal patience wearing thin across multiple timelines. If we could begin. Hold on, Elena interrupted, checking her tablet. We're still waiting for the Celestial Convocation's representative and the Quantum Collective's ambassador. They're in transit, Zephyrix said. They'll arrive in exactly 4 minutes and, he paused, consulting his temporal matrix. No, 3 minutes and 47 seconds. Great. Mira said, sitting down and immediately putting her feet up on the conference table. That gives us time for coffee. Anyone want some? Fair warning, it's from the backup machine, so it might taste like Starship fuel. We did not master temporal mechanics to wait for beverages, Zephyrix muttered. Your loss, Elena said, pouring herself a cup. So, while we wait, what's the actual plan here? You've gathered representatives from the 9 most powerful civilizations in the galaxy. You've shared data about the Devourers. But what's the strategy? Zephyrix activated the central hologram, which displayed a swirling map of temporal probabilities. We have identified 3 possible approaches. First, a coordinated temporal assault. Every species that can manipulate time would strike simultaneously across multiple timelines. Won't work, Yuki interrupted, studying the data. The Devourers exist outside normal spacetime. They just absorb the temporal energy. How did you? Korath began, shocked. That analysis took us 300 years to complete. It's pretty obvious once you see it, Yuki said, zooming in on the probability matrix. See how the deviation curves collapse here? That's temporal absorption. Classic entropy trap. Counselor Thane's crystalline form brightened with interest. Fascinating. The human actually understood it. Don't sound so surprised, Mira said. We might be late, but we're not stupid. What's option 2? Mass evacuation, Admiral Cressix proposed. We retreat to neighboring galaxies, establish new colonies, and wait for the Devourers to move on. Except they don't move on, Dax said, pulling up his own research. I studied the data from the 3 galaxies they've already consumed. They don't just eat and leave, they colonize the emptiness. If we retreat, we're just delaying the inevitable. The doors opened precisely on schedule. Ambassador Lyrics of the Celestial Convocation glided in, their energy form pulsing with irritation. You started without. They stopped, seeing Myra's feet still on the table. Why are humans always so casual about everything? Because stress is bad for you, Mira replied cheerfully. Option 3, Zephyrix? Zephyrix hesitated. This was the option he'd been dreading. A temporal lock. We create a barrier in spacetime that freezes the Devourers in a permanent moment. They exist, but they never move forward. They're trapped in a single instant forever. Sounds perfect, said Counselor Thane. What's the catch? It requires someone to enter the temporal lock with them, Korath explained quietly. To maintain the field, a consciousness must remain inside, eternally experiencing that single frozen moment. They would be aware but unable to move, speak, or change. Forever. The room fell silent. Even Captain Whiskers stopped investigating Admiral Cressix's appendages. That's not an option, Mira said flatly. We're not sacrificing anyone. Then what do you propose? Zephyrix asked. We've calculated every possibility. No, Elena interrupted. You've calculated every possibility you can perceive. But you just told us that human timelines are unpredictable to you. That we make decisions that shouldn't exist in your probability matrices. True, Zephyrix admitted. Mira swung her feet off the table and leaned forward. Then let us do what we do best. Be late? Admiral Cressix asked dryly. No, Mira grinned. Improvise. Yuki pulled up a blank planning screen. We need to stop thinking about this as a war. The Devourers aren't an enemy, they're a problem. And humans are really, really good at solving problems at the last possible second. Usually because we caused the problem in the first place, Dax added. Details? Mira waved him off. Zephyrix, you said the Devourers eat probability itself, right? They collapse timelines? Correct. So what if? Mira paused and Zephyrix saw something extraordinary happen. In his temporal vision, he watched as the probability lines around her became completely opaque. Whatever she was about to say didn't exist in any timeline he could observe. What if, Mira continued, we give them something they can't digest? And what would that be? Ambassador Lyrics asked. Myra's grin widened. Chaos. Controlled unpredictability. The planning session had devolved into what Zephyrix could only describe as organized mayhem. Humans called it brainstorming. Okay, hear me out, Lieutenant Jasper Reed said, standing on his chair for no apparent reason. What if we build a giant temporal maze? The Devourers go in, they get lost, problem solved. They consume space-time, Admiral Cressix said flatly. They would simply eat the maze. Right, but what if the maze was made of paradoxes? Jasper continued, undeterred. Like, you know how when you go back in time and accidentally step on a butterfly, the whole timeline changes? What if we made a maze entirely out of temporal butterflies? Counselor Thane looked at Zephyrix. Is he serious? I genuinely cannot tell, Zephyrix admitted. That's actually not completely insane, Yuki said from her workstation, where she'd been running simulations for the past hour while simultaneously eating a sandwich and teaching Captain Whiskers to high-five. The Devourers consume linear probability chains. But what if we created a space where probability doesn't work linearly? Koratha's temporal form flickered with interest. A quantum uncertainty field? Bigger, Yuki said, her eyes lighting up. A chaos field. A region of space where cause and effect are suggestions. That's impossible, Ambassador Lyric stated. The laws of physics don't work that way. They do for humans, Dax said, pulling up a file on the main display. Remember the Battle of Proxima Station? According to every tactical analysis, we should have lost. The enemy had superior numbers, better positioning, and more advanced weapons. But you won through superior strategy, Admiral Cressix said. No, Mira corrected, standing up and walking to the display. We won because Ensign Parker accidentally fired the wrong weapon system, which hit our own shield generator, which caused a feedback loop that somehow created an electromagnetic pulse that disabled the enemy's targeting computers. Everyone stared at her. He got a medal for that? Counselor Thane asked, incredulous. He got 2 medals, Elena confirmed. One for bravery, one for creative problem-solving. He pressed the wrong button. Zephyrix's temporal senses were actively rebelling against this information. Yes, but he pressed it at exactly the wrong moment, Mira said. And that's the point. We don't win because we're more advanced or more powerful. We win because we're unpredictable enough that even we don't know what we're going to do. Yuki jumped up, nearly spilling her coffee. That's it. That's exactly it. Zephyrix, you said the Devourers eat probability itself. They consume timeline branches, right? Correct. So they're essentially processing the universe like a computer program, calculating which timelines exist and consuming them systematically. Also correct. But what if we gave them data they can't process? Yuki's hands flew across her interface, pulling up calculations. Humans are walking paradoxes to your temporal models. You can't predict what we'll do because we operate on a level of chaos that doesn't fit neat probability curves. What if we weaponize that? Quarith leaned forward, his form splitting into multiple temporal echoes as he processed the implications. You're suggesting we create a region of space governed by human decision-making patterns? Exactly. Yuki grinned. We fill a massive area with scenarios that require moment-to-moment human choices. Situations that can't be predicted or calculated in advance. The devourers enter thinking they can process and consume it, but instead, they choke on the computational equivalent of random noise. Zephyrix finished, his temporal mind racing. It's insane. It's completely insane. It might actually work. How do we create such a field? Ambassador Lyrics asked. Human unpredictability can't simply be bottled and deployed. Actually, Elena said, pulling up a series of files, it kind of can. Over the past 200 years, humans have colonized 17 star systems. In every single one, we've built societies that function despite making no logical sense. We have cities where the traffic patterns shift daily based on vibes. We have economies that should collapse but somehow thrive on last-minute decisions. We have entire governments that run on the principle of, we'll figure it out as we go. That sounds horrifying, Admiral Kresick said. It sounds human, Mira corrected. And now we're going to make it tactical. Dax pulled up a star chart showing the Devourer's approach vector. They're moving through the Callian sector. If we can create a chaos field here, he highlighted a cluster of systems, we force them to pass through it. Filling it with what, exactly? Counselor Thane asked. Myra's smile turned predatory. Humans? Thousands of them. All doing exactly what humans do best. Which is making it up as they go along. Zephyrix felt something he'd never experienced before, hope based on complete uncertainty. We would need to evacuate those systems first. Populate them with human volunteers who understand the plan. The plan being to have no plan? Ambassador Lyrics asked. The plan being to embrace chaos, Elena corrected. We give the Devourers a computational problem they can't solve, the human element. Jasper raised his hand. So basically, we're going to confuse the universe-eating monsters to death? When you put it that way it sounds stupid, Dax said. It is stupid, Admiral Kresick said. Which is precisely why it might work against an enemy that's consumed countless civilizations using logical, predictable tactics. Zephyrix looked around the room at the assembled representatives. The most advanced civilizations in the galaxy, all staring at a plan that violated every principle of strategic warfare. We're actually considering this, he said aloud to no one in particular. We're definitely doing this, Mira corrected. Yuki, how long to set up the chaos field? 3 weeks, maybe 4. You have 2, Mira said. Because the Devourers will be here in 6 and we need time to test it. How do you test controlled chaos? Quarith asked. Mira grinned. We're about to find out. The chaos deployment. The Callian sector had once been home to thriving mining colonies, orderly, efficient operations managed by the Precision League. Now, 2 weeks later, it was home to 12,000 humans and what Admiral Kresick described as the most beautiful disaster I've ever witnessed. Zephyrix stood on the observation deck of the temporal nexus, watching the chaos unfold across multiple timelines simultaneously. In every possible future he could observe, this should not work. Yet somehow, impossibly, the field was stabilizing. Status report, Mira said, walking onto the deck with yet another coffee. Zephyrix had learned to track time not by chronometers but by how many coffee cups she'd consumed. They were currently at early afternoon. The chaos field is functioning, Quarith said, his temporal form flickering with confusion. I don't understand how, but it's functioning. On the view screen, the Callian sector looked normal at first glance. Stations orbited planets, ships moved between waypoints and civilian life continued. But to Zephyrix's temporal senses, it was pandemonium. In Timeline Branch Alpha, Station 7 is about to have a containment breach because someone left a sandwich in the reactor coolant system, he reported. That was Ensign Parker, Mira said without surprise. What happened? The breach was prevented because another crew member randomly decided to do an unscheduled inspection because, and I quote, something felt weird. Classic Parker and Mendez, Dax said, reviewing his own reports. They've accidentally saved that station 4 times this week. Counselor Thane materialized beside them, his crystalline form pulsing with academic fascination. I've been studying the probability matrices. In the past 2 weeks, your people have created 847,000 unpredictable decision points in this sector alone. The probability branches are magnificent. He pulled up a visual representation. Where normal space showed clean, predictable timeline branches, the Callian sector looked like someone had thrown a handful of spaghetti at a wall. It's beautiful, Thane whispered. Absolutely chaotic and beautiful. It's giving me a temporal headache, Zephrix muttered. I've stopped trying to predict what your people will do. Yesterday, Commander Hayes decided to reroute her entire patrol fleet because she wanted to check out a nebula that looked cool. And? Mira prompted. And she discovered a previously unknown spatial anomaly that we can use as an anchor point for the chaos field, Zephrix admitted. By accident. That's not an accident, Elena said, joining them. That's a Tuesday. Yuki burst onto the observation deck, her hair even more disheveled than usual, clutching a data pad. It's working. The chaos field is generating nonlinear probability cascades. The Devourers are going to hit this and their temporal processing is going to... She made an exploding gesture with her hands. Are we sure about that? Ambassador Lyrics asked. We're betting the galaxy on human randomness. Not randomness, Yuki corrected. Controlled chaos. There's a difference. Randomness is just noise. What humans do is make intuitive leaps that connect disparate data points in ways that logical analysis misses. She pulled up her simulation. Watch this. I fed the chaos field data into a predictive model. According to pure mathematics, the field should collapse in 17 different critical points. But when I factor in human decision-making, specifically, the likelihood that humans will accidentally solve problems they didn't know existed, the field becomes self-sustaining. That's impossible, Counselor Thane said. It shouldn't work, Yuki agreed. But humans break the rules so consistently that we've essentially made rule-breaking into a functional system. Zephrix felt a strange emotion he couldn't identify, until he realized it was admiration. You've weaponized your own dysfunction. Now you're getting it, Mira said, clinking her coffee mug against his temporal stabilizer in a mock toast. An alert chimed across the bridge. Admiral Cressix's voice came through on the comm. Devourers are entering sensor range. They'll reach the chaos field in 72 hours. Time to see if this insanity actually works, Dax said. Over the next 3 days, Zephrix watched as 12,000 humans went about their daily lives in the Callian sector, completely oblivious to the cosmic horror approaching them. They argued about sports, forgot to file reports on time, reorganized shift schedules on a whim, and made countless small decisions that rippled through probability space in ways Zephrix couldn't predict. A transport pilot named Vera Quinn decided to take a scenic route through an asteroid field, just because. Engineer Marcus Tobin fixed a comm array that wasn't broken because he was bored. A medical officer named Dr. Rahul Sharma reorganized his entire supply closet in the middle of a shift because he didn't like the way it felt. Each action, meaningless on its own, created cascading probability branches that made the chaos field denser, more complex, and more unpredictable. They have no idea they're soldiers in the strangest war ever fought, Korath observed. That's what makes them perfect, Mira replied. They're not trying to be unpredictable. They just are. On the morning of the third day, long-range sensors detected the Devourers entering the outer edge of the Callian sector. Every ship, every station, every representative from every allied species watched their screens in silence. The Devourers' approach had been consistent across 3 galaxies, a steady, inexorable advance that consumed everything in its path. Their trajectory never wavered. Their speed never changed. Until now. They're slowing down, Korath said, his voice barely a whisper across multiple timelines. The field is working, Yuki breathed. On the sensors, the Devourers' formation began to distort. Their perfect geometry, unchanged for millennia, started to twist and fragment as they encountered the chaos field's edge. They're trying to process it, Zephrix said, watching probability matrices that even he couldn't fully parse. They're attempting to calculate the probability branches to consume them, but there are too many, Counselor Thane finished. And they're changing too fast. In the Callian sector, completely unaware of the cosmic drama unfolding, Ensign Parker accidentally activated the wrong console and created a minor power fluctuation that rippled through 3 stations. On the sensors, the Devourers' formation shuddered. Did that just... Ambassador Lyrics began. Yes, Mira said, her voice tight with barely controlled excitement. One ensign pressing the wrong button just disrupted a force that's destroyed galaxies. This is the stupidest thing that's ever worked, Admiral Cressix said. But it is working, Elena replied. Zephrix stared at the display, watching as the unstoppable force that had haunted his temporal calculations for 3,000 years finally, impossibly, stopped. "We're not out of this yet," he cautioned. "They've paused, but they haven't retreated." "Then we give them a reason to," Mira said. "It's time for Phase 2. "Phase 2? Zephyrix asked. "There's a Phase 2? Myra's grin was absolutely terrifying. "Of course there is. We made it up 3 days ago." "That's cutting it a bit close," Korath said. "Story of our lives," Dax replied. "Literally. The impossible offensive." "Explain Phase 2 again," Zephyrix said, "because I've analyzed it across 17,000 timelines and in every single one, it ends with us being very dead." "That's the point," Yuki said, pulling up her tactical display. "You're still thinking in terms of probability and causality. We're going to hit them with something they fundamentally cannot process." The Allied fleet had gathered at the edge of the Callian sector. 23 different species, hundreds of ships, all watching as the Devourers remained frozen at the Chaos Field's boundary, their formation stuttering and reforming as they attempted to calculate a way through. "They're stalled but they're adapting," Korath reported. "In approximately 14 hours, they'll develop a processing algorithm that can handle the Chaos Field's complexity." "Then we don't have 14 hours, Mira said. "We have 12. Because we need 2 hours for the setup." "Setup for what?" Admiral Cressix demanded. Elena pulled up the plan, if it could be called that. It looked more like someone had sneezed on a tactical display. "We're going to attack," she said. Silence. "Attack," Counselor Thane repeated slowly, "the entity that has consumed 3 entire galaxies and exists outside normal spacetime." "Yep," Mira confirmed cheerfully. "With what?" Ambassador Lyrics asked. "We've already established that conventional weapons don't work. Temporal weapons don't work. The Chaos Field can only stall them, not." "We're going to attack them with lateness," Dax interrupted. More silence. "I'm sorry," Zephyrix said. "Did you just say?" "Lateness," Dax confirmed. "The Devourers process probability chains, right? They calculate when and where things will be, then consume those possibilities. But what if we create a scenario where nothing is where it's supposed to be when it's supposed to be there?" Yuki jumped in, her excitement palpable. "The Devourer's entire strategy relies on prediction. They calculate the universe's timeline and eat it systematically. But humans are always late. We're early. We're in the wrong place. We forget things and have to go back. We change our minds halfway through. We're temporal chaos incarnate. So we're going to schedule an attack and then not show up on time?" Admiral Cressix asked, trying to follow the logic. "Better," Mira said. "We're going to schedule multiple attacks, show up late to all of them, early to some, and completely forget about others. We're going to create such a massive temporal coordination failure that the Devourers won't be able to predict where we actually are." Zephyrix felt his temporal sense rebelling against the very concept. "That's not a strategy. That's just incompetence." "Weaponized incompetence," Elena corrected. "There's a difference. And it's going to work," Yuki added, "because the Devourers can't comprehend it. They exist in a state of perfect temporal awareness. They know when things will happen. But they can't know when things won't happen on schedule." Counselor Thane's crystalline form pulsed with what might have been laughter or horror, possibly both. "You're going to defeat an ancient cosmic horror by missing your deadlines." "Not just missing them," Dax said. "Missing them in the most chaotic, unpredictable ways possible. Some ships will arrive early. Some will arrive late. Some will go to the wrong coordinates entirely. And some," he grinned, "some will arrive exactly on time just to keep them guessing." "This is insane," Ambassador Lyrics said. "But it's brilliant," Korath whispered, his temporal vision finally grasping the pattern, or rather, the deliberate lack of pattern. "The Devourers will try to predict your movements, but every prediction will be wrong. They'll expend energy calculating probabilities that don't exist." "Exactly," Yuki said. "We're going to give them the computational equivalent of a paradox. They can't process maybe, or I forgot, or I changed my mind. Those concepts don't exist in their framework." The plan was distributed to the fleet. Zephyrix watched as human captains read their orders and immediately began implementing them with what could only be described as enthusiastic disorganization. Captain Helena Voss of the Star Weaver was supposed to attack Vector 7 at 1,400 hours. She decided to arrive at 1,347 hours because traffic was lighter than expected. Commander J. Park of the Horizon's Edge was scheduled for Vector 12 at 1,530 hours. He showed up at Vector 13 at 1615 hours because he misread the coordinates. Lieutenant Sarah Chen forgot about her attack run entirely because she was helping engineering fix a coffee maker that wasn't broken. This is chaos, Admiral Kresick said, watching the tactical display with a mixture of horror and fascination. This is humanity, Mira replied. The Devourers, still processing the chaos field, suddenly faced a new problem. A fleet that refused to behave according to any predictable pattern. Ships appeared where they shouldn't be. Attacks came at the wrong times. Some vessels retreated before even engaging. Others lingered after their scheduled departure. On the sensors, the Devourers' formation began to fragment further. Their perfect geometry, honed over millennia of consuming galaxies, couldn't adapt to an enemy that didn't follow its own battle plans. They're destabilizing, Korath reported, awe in his voice. The Devourers are actually destabilizing. Keep it up. Mira broadcast to the fleet. Remember, if you're supposed to be somewhere, be literally anywhere else. If you're early, leave early. If you're late, stay late. Make no sense. This is the worst military strategy I've ever witnessed, Admiral Kresick said. But it's working, Counselor Thane added. And it was. The Devourers, beings of perfect temporal calculation, were encountering an enemy that defied calculation itself. Every processing cycle they dedicated to predicting human movements failed. Every probability matrix collapsed into nonsense. A destroyer captain named Marcus Webb summed it up perfectly in his after-action report. Was supposed to attack at 1500. Got there at 1437. Left at 1512 because I thought I was late. Came back at 1544 because I realized I forgot my tactical officer. Enemy seemed confused. The Devourers weren't just confused, they were overloading. Their temporal processing is fragmenting, Zephyr said, watching something he'd never thought possible. They're trying to calculate too many impossible probability chains simultaneously. Hit them with Phase 3, Mira ordered. There's a Phase 3? Multiple voices asked simultaneously. We came up with it during Phase 2, Elena explained. Right after someone mentioned the coffee maker. What's Phase 3? Zephyr asked, almost afraid to know. Myra's smile was absolutely feral. We show up exactly on time. To everything. Perfectly coordinated. Completely predictable. But, Korath began. They've just spent hours adapting to our unpredictability, Yuki explained. They've restructured their entire processing algorithm to handle chaos. So now we hit them with perfect order. That's. Zephyr paused. That's actually tactical genius. It's also really funny, Dax added. The fleet synchronized. For the first time in the entire engagement, every ship moved exactly according to plan. Every attack came precisely on schedule. Every maneuver executed with perfect timing. The Devourers, having just adapted to chaos, faced perfect order, and couldn't process the shift. Their formation shattered. Now, Mira shouted. All ships, final strike. But here's where the plan got truly, beautifully human. Every single ship was exactly 3 minutes late to the final attack. Not because they were ordered to be. They just were. Because humans. And that final, unplanned, completely accidental display of humanity's relationship with time? That's what broke the Devourers. The morning after. The Devourers collapsed not with a bang, but with what Zephyr could only describe as a temporal sigh. Their formation, having failed to process both chaos and order in rapid succession, simply came apart. The entity that had consumed 3 galaxies dissolved into fragments of probability, scattered across dimensions that no longer connected to each other. In the command center of the temporal nexus, every species representative stared at their displays in stunned silence. Did we? Counselor Thane began. Did we just? Ambassador Lyrics continued. Did we just defeat an unstoppable cosmic force by being late? Admiral Kresick finished. Technically, Yuki said, reviewing the data, we defeated them with a combination of controlled chaos, tactical unpredictability, rapid pattern shifting, and yes, being exactly 3 minutes late to the final attack. Why 3 minutes? Korath asked. Why not 2? Or 5? No idea, Dax admitted. Every ship just happened to be 3 minutes late. We didn't plan it. Which made it perfect, Zephyr said, finally understanding. If you'd planned to be 3 minutes late, it would have been predictable. But because it was genuinely accidental, because it was authentically human, it was the one variable the Devourers couldn't compute. Mira leaned back in her chair, coffee mug raised in salute. Here's to being consistently inconsistent. The celebration that followed was, naturally, a beautiful mess. The Chronarchs had planned a formal ceremony to begin at exactly 2000 hours Galactic Standard Time. At 1947 hours, the humans had already started celebrating in the observation lounge. By 2015 hours, half the fleet had joined them, and the formal ceremony was abandoned in favor of what Lieutenant Jasper Reed called the best party in the galaxy. Captain Whiskers somehow became an honorary admiral. Zephrix found himself in the observation lounge at approximately 2237 hours. He'd stopped tracking precise time somewhere around his third encounter with human Champagne, watching the Callian sector slowly return to its previous state of organized efficiency. "It's strange," he said to Korath, who was flickering between multiple timelines but staying anchored to this particular moment. "For 3,000 years I've been able to see the future. Every possible timeline stretched out before me. And now, Korath prompted. "Now I have no idea what happens next," Zephrix finished. "The human timelines are more opaque than ever. It's unsettling." "Is it?" Mira asked, appearing beside him with impeccable timing, or terrible timing, he still couldn't tell which. "Or is it freeing?" "How is uncertainty freeing?" "Because possibility is better than inevitability," she said, looking out at the stars. "You spent 3,000 years knowing how things would end. We spend every day not knowing what tomorrow brings. And yeah, it's terrifying sometimes. But it's also exciting." Counselor Thane joined them, his crystalline form still pulsing with academic fascination. "I've been reviewing the data. In the past month, you humans have created more unpredictable timeline branches than my entire species has generated in 10,000 years. Is that a compliment?" Dax asked, wandering over with Elena. "I honestly can't tell," Thane admitted. "But it's definitely interesting. The Precision League has spent millennia trying to eliminate chaos from our civilization. You've spent centuries perfecting it." "We prefer embracing spontaneity," Elena corrected. Admiral Cressix approached, her hive collective consciousness still struggling to process the day's events. "My species has operated on quantum-synchronized decision-making for 50,000 years. Every member of the hive knows exactly what every other member is thinking and planning. It's efficient. It's perfect. But," Mira prompted. "But after watching you lot stumble through this crisis, being late, forgetting things, pressing wrong buttons, making it up as you went along, I find myself wondering." She paused. "What would it be like to not know what happens next?" "Scary," Yuki said honestly. "But also kind of fun." "Fun," Cressix repeated the word like she was tasting something exotic. "The hive does not typically prioritize fun." "You should try it sometime," Jasper said, having wandered over with Captain Whiskers perched on his shoulder. "Being unpredictable is great. Last week I discovered a new nebula because I got lost on a routine patrol. That nebula turned out to have rare mineral deposits worth 17 billion credits," Elena added. "Happy accidents," Mira said. "The foundation of human civilization." Ambassador Lyrics materialized in the group, their energy form pulsing thoughtfully. "The Celestial Convocation will need to update our entire philosophical framework. We've always believed that enlightenment comes from understanding the cosmic order. But you've demonstrated that there's power in embracing cosmic disorder." "We're not really embracing it," Dax said. "We're just living it. We don't try to be chaotic. We just are. That's what makes it authentic," Zephrix said, his temporal senses finally relaxing. "For the first time in my existence, I'm experiencing true uncertainty. And you know what?" "What?" Korath asked. "It's actually quite refreshing." The party continued well into the night, though night was a relative concept on a space station. Someone organized an impromptu zero-gravity football game. Dr. Rahul Sharma taught several Chronarchs how to make coffee the human way, which involved a lot of trial and error. Ensign Parker somehow got locked in a storage closet again. At some point, Counselor Thane asked Yuki to explain human music theory. 3 hours later, they were still arguing about why certain songs were catchy despite having no mathematical logic. "It just feels right," Yuki insisted. "But why does it feel right?" Thane asked, genuinely desperate to understand. "Because it does." Zephrix watched all of this unfold and realized something profound. The Chronarchs had spent millennia mastering time, believing that perfect knowledge of the future was the ultimate achievement. But the humans had mastered something else entirely, the art of living in the moment even when the moment made no logical sense. They were late to meetings but early to making friends. They forgot procedures but remembered kindness. They pressed wrong buttons that sometimes saved the day. As the artificial dawn began to glow through the observation windows, Mira found Zephyrix still at his spot, watching the stars. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked. "Chronarchs don't sleep in the traditional sense," he said. "But I find myself reluctant for this moment to end. Because you can't predict what comes next?" "Precisely." Mira smiled, handing him a cup of coffee, his first ever. "Welcome to being human, Zephyrix. We're chronically late, consistently inconsistent, and we wouldn't have it any other way." He took the cup, tasted the bitter liquid, and made a face that transcended species barriers. "This is terrible," he said. "Yeah," Mira agreed. "But you'll develop a taste for it. Usually around the third cup." "Will I?" "Probably. Maybe. I don't know." She grinned. "Isn't uncertainty wonderful?" And for the first time in 3,000 years of perceiving every possible timeline, Zephyrix laughed. Not because he saw the humor coming but because it surprised him. In the Callian sector, the last traces of the Devourer fragments faded away. The chaos field slowly dissipated. The probability matrices returned to their normal, mostly predictable patterns. But something had changed in the galaxy. The species that had mastered time had learned the value of wasting it. The civilizations that had perfected efficiency had discovered the beauty of happy accidents. And humanity? Humanity continued being exactly what it had always been, beautifully, chaotically, magnificently late to everything, including the end of the universe, which they would probably show up to 5 minutes after it was supposed to happen, holding coffee and apologizing profusely. The galaxy was saved not by those who controlled time, but by those who could never quite figure out where it went. And somewhere, in a timeline that Zephyrix could no longer predict, Captain Whiskers was declared the official mascot of the Galactic Defense Force. Because of course he was. Because humans,